Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Great.
Good question, Schmidty. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right. I'm recovering.
That's good.
I'm just having, for our listeners, a little indigestion issue. Taken some bicarb soda and I've blown up like Mount Vesuvius. So I'll try to manage my burpage throughout this episode and hopefully it'll settle down.
Excellent.
Dr. Wu has you on the bicarb.
Oh, look, I am a firm fan of the bicarb soda.
Yeah.
It's quite immediate. It's curing properties when you've got too much acid going on in your stomach. But anyway, any news? We just had a little break.
Yes. Arthur's joined
Go
us.
on. Oh, yes.
I realised what happened was
Marty.
we had an electrician here all morning and he was on high alert. Then I went out for like an hour and a half, maybe more, where he would normally have slept. But then when Bridge was on and everyone was there, he just watched the whole time. So I think he's exhausted himself. So he was asleep, like really out to it downstairs. So he's joined us now to offer his opinion.
I found a headline that has kind of thrown me, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Yes.
So I've been seeing a little bit lately about how Victoria's got this massive crime problem.
Oh,
and
yes.
the government's doing nothing about
Knife
it.
crime.
And,
Yeah.
you know, with an election coming up,
Oh,
you'd
thanks for
expect them to come out and finally do something about it. So the headline that I've just seen is ban on machetes to be announced in Victoria as part of crime package. Like, far out. Why does you have so many people being attacked by machetes? Why do you all of a sudden have to, why do you ban it in the lead up to an election, not actually years ago? Why is that even a thing?
I think you'll find machetes are banned. I mean, they just come under a whole raft of evil weapons that are used, and basically using weaponry against people and assaulting people is banned. It's against the law. This is just one of these stupid knee-jerk reactions to these crimes where it's like, you know, there's mobile phones. You can't use a mobile phone in the car, so we brought out a special fine for if you're using your mobile phone. The reality is reckless driving was already illegal. If you're using a phone or you're distracted while you're driving, you are committing reckless driving and it was already illegal. But we have to do this.
But
we have to fucking legislate for the minority.
someone's banned knives and not machetes, according to this heading. Like,
Well, machete's just a big knife.
That's what I'm saying. What on earth? But also,
And swords.
we
you
don't know
how
what to do.
walk
It's
around the
such a
streets with
complicated issue. Let's not do anything about it. We don't really know what to do. Oh, I know. Why don't we ban machetes? Like, how many people sat around a table and came up with that stroke of genius?
I don't know, but I do know that a young man that my sister taught when she was working at a certain school in the northern suburbs was killed with a machete at a train station.
That's
couple of years back.
horrendous.
What?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, gang crime. He upset
But
the wrong person.
I
And
would've-
Where do you buy a machete, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I don't know. I
Where
mean,
do you
we
pick
used to
one
have
up?
one on the houseboat. but-
Machetes are us.
Where do you pick one
Or
up?
a-
I know. What?
A sex shop or a
you know what-
tobacco shop?
No, one of those like camping supply, not camping supply, not Anaconda. You know, like the
BCF and fun.
not BC. No, I'm thinking more like Aussie disposal,
Army disposals.
army disposal type place.
It'll be an illegal chop shop or a sex shop, I reckon. They'll have them under the counter.
Really? Oh,
Oh,
God.
I don't know.
But you know,
but
if
they
you buy
have-
any single kind of little, like, I don't know, school scissors or something like so benign, it's covered in so much plastic, you've got to get a bloody machete,
A machete
to get
open.
into it. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I've got 2 knives downstairs that I got for free, like as part of like Flybuys or something. And I cannot be asked to actually open them because the process of trying to get that and hard plastic, I just
hate
put them in a
that
bottom
hard
drawer and I thought,
plastic.
oh, I'll just leave them there.
Apart
Anyway.
from knife crime in Victoria, no other news.
No. That's
Okay,
it.
well, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. I'm Schmidty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial
Bye.
by
Wine.
And what are we drinking?
Oh,
You
yeah.
still on your urine water?
No, look, I've upped it. I've gone greener. I'm using the
San
remnants of
Pellegrino.
Bridgewater.
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 It's a lovely place in the UK. Yeah.
Yes. That's
And
it.
boys-
We're having
boys are-
a ginger lemon
Oh,
kombucha,
Is it nice?
which actually, Swanee, if I put it into a glass or into the
Looks
glass
like urine.
probably looks a little bit like urine. Yeah. It's I might try it. Should do an experiment.
But there's a lot of sediment in it.
Tastes like
sediment.
urine
Ooh.
too.
Oh, you
I
want?
can't stand
Don't want that in
kombucha.
your urine.
What do you see come up?
Oh, what's that thing?
Ladies.
What's the thing that lives in it? The bacteria. What's it called?
There it is.
Oh, look, it's like fizzy urine.
Casey,
What's the
I'm
name
sure-
of the thing?
Cloudy.
What's the name of the active thing that lives in it called in kombucha?
Kombucha, isn't it?
No, it's
No.
the
Called
mother,
kombucha?
the yeasty thing,
Yeah.
the
Oh.
thing. I know it.
Isn't the mother? That's in the apple cider vinegar. It's got another name, hasn't it?
It's got something. People were trading it at one point on Facebook Marketplace. Gross. Anyway,
Yeah, that's it. Oh, sorry. Oh.
it's some kind of bacterial base.
Yeah.
Like when you
I thought
make
it
a
was-
sourdough and you do it and then you keep using a bit of the culture. It's the culture base.
Culture.
But there's a word for it. You're right.
That's it.
And is what? What is it?
No, the culture, wasn't it?
Oh, right.
Yeah, I reckon it's
I'm
culture.
sure it has another
We thought
word.
you went off looking for the name.
Yeah.
Oh no,
What
no,
am I
no.
thinking of?
Maybe it's some. I can hear the
It's not like the stuff
Crickets.
in
the
your quilt.
crickets. You're cool.
Do you want me to go and tell them to shut up?
Just stop it out a
Scoby.
bit.
Scoby.
Scoby, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
that doesn't sound
Jesus.
good, does it? Scoby. Yeah.
It sounds
No, it sounds
terrible. Can you get a cream for that?
A SCOBY is a symbiotic. There you go, Schmidty from last week. Symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. Yeah, I think they need some caniston for that. Anyway,
Yeah,
on
I
that
agree.
note,
Bicarb.
on that note,
Bicarb
bicarb.
canister.
If
Yeah.
we do some heavy
That'll
lifting
kill
for the
anything.
bicarb,
Get that
Yeah.
canister laundry wash stuff that gets rid of it all. That's what you need. Nice liquid form. All right.
What are you
so-
drinking?
I was going to say thanks for asking. I'm still
Sorry.
on rum and coke. So a bit of Sailor Jerry's and Peps.
Right. Can you finish this story? Let's see.
I can. Okay, so this is a case I've wanted to cover for quite some time. But I am really pleased that I held off. And, quite often you hear about something that's very timely. So the story's just broken, it's just come out, and you have a read of it and you think, oh, right, okay. So you get this idea of what had happened. Well, you've got a set view, right? So you've read it, you've gone, oh, yeah, that's what happened. This person's killed this person or whatever. And so when I first looked at this, it would be probably 2, if not 3 years ago.
yep.
And I think it was pre-sentencing and mid-trial that I picked up on the story. But even then, something was off.
Ooh.
And so I haven't covered it, and it's come up a few other times, and I still am like, I'm not ready to do it. And then I started to look at it again this weekend, and I thought, I think the timing's right.
You can do it. You
I
can do it.
I can do it.
I
yeah.
think it's.
You
I think
know
it's
you
the right
can.
time.
So first,
got
I'm
this.
going to provide our listeners with huge trigger warning.
Oh,
For anyone who's affected by stories involving the death of babies, then I don't think you should listen to this story.
Okay, see ya.
See you next week.
Yeah,
Uh,
like far out. Who's not affected by the death of babies?
Well, if you're really triggered by it, is what I'm saying.
Why does Swanee and I have to listen? Swanee, you're upset about that, aren't you?
oh.
Depends on the baby.
Yeah.
No, she's got the giggles again.
Oh, I shouldn't.
Jesus.
That's 'cause
Anyone
she's
who's-
just being evil, and she's just
Anyone
I'm
who's
just-
upset by the
I'm
death of
just
babies,
playing
leave
to
the
the
room.
crowd.
Apart from you lot, you stay.
I'm just
Yeah.
playing to the
You
crowd.
have to play. You have to play. You have to stay. That's your job. Okay, so my sources are Wikipedia, thesun.co.uk, theguardian.com, brunel.ac.uk, abc.com.au, bbc.com, sbs.com.au, Sky News, the New York Times and the Telegraph, and unheard.com, to name but a few.
Wow.
Unheard.
I think I can know what it is.
Speak louder.
Well, you probably will. It's
I
pretty
think I will.
big deal.
Big, yeah.
So this story takes place in lovely Chester, UK. Now, usually I'd spend a bit of time setting the scene, but I'm just going to jump straight in because there's no backstory to speak of. Lucy Letby was a neonatal nurse working at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Swanee?
Mm.
Yeah. She'd done her Bachelor of Science in Nursing at the Uni of Chester and had completed her work placement at Liverpool Women's Hospital and graduated with a specialty in child nursing in 2010. Lucy went on to do a bit more study in neonatal care in 2014. She did some more study in neonatal care and in 2015, and she qualified to work with infants in intensive care in 2015. Lucy had had a few issues in her career, and at the time I'm talking is 2015. She's 25, so she's probably just been out of nursing 2 years, and she's done this specialty in neonatal care and intensive care for infants very, very recently at this point. In one case in her career, she and a more senior nurse had overdosed a baby with morphine, 10 times the amount that they had intended to give the child. And that got her suspended from administering drugs. And that was in July 2013. And I didn't find anything to suggest that the baby had died. So they suspended her, and Lucy had to do some further training. But she arced up about that, probably because in her mind, the other nurse, who was much more senior, had been supervising her. So I'm guessing she probably blamed the other nurse, and her suspension had actually been lifted. In April 2016, she also accidentally gave antibiotics to a baby that wasn't prescribed them. But in her view, that was a minor error. And her manager put her on day shifts after that. And I assume the baby in question didn't have an allergy for the antibiotics and survived it. So if the kid had a allergy to penicillin, it would have been a different story. Now, given where this story heads, calling out professional errors of a healthcare worker is an interesting approach. And I think this is because when you go back to the start of this story, people have been pulling on threads for some time over this case. And what I mean by that is people were trying, so this is from the Wikipedia, right? When you follow the Wikipedia timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And people, I think, have been trying to set a scene that Lucy was a danger to children, even around these other stories. And so they've been pulling on, they look a lot at all sorts of things about Lucy to, I think, draw some conclusions about her personality and her behaviours that then support where the story goes. However, having said that, I just think, what of the senior nurse who was at the same overdose incident? We don't hear anything more about them. We don't know who that was or how many other professional incidents they have been involved with, and how many of the people or babies in their care have had the wrong drugs given to them. And that's because they were at the centre of this scandal. So back to June 2015. Lucy was working at the hospital in the neonatal ICU. And I just want to be really clear, the neonatal ICU is a place that premature and very sick babies go to get better if they are able to. It's not a place that very healthy children end up in. And as a premature baby myself, I know, hard to believe, the doctor said to my mother, she'll always be small, this one. Well, he was wrong, wasn't he? Nearly 6 foot tall and built like a brick shithouse.
God, imagine how big you would have been otherwise.
I know, right?
Far out.
So, yes, I was a prem baby.
Dodged a bullet there. You would have banged your head on every doorway you walked through.
And I believe Lucy Letby was also a prem baby, and the nursing staff and doctors had fought to save her life, and it was part of why she wanted to become a nurse and she wanted to look after babies. It was because she felt very affected by the fact that people had done that for her.
Were you poorly, Schmidty, or just small?
Not that I remember.
Well, no.
No, I don't think I was poorly. I just came out
so you weren't like in neonatal ICU, or you were just...
no one really talked about it. I'm going to put it down to the fact that Mum smoked and drank all the way through her final pregnancy with me, because it was 1974.
Yeah.
That, I just came out early. I went, Mum, I've had enough of that.
Oh.
And said, I'm out. Choo choo. Anyway, Lucy was a qualified junior nurse at this point, and there was, I think she might have been the only one, or there were only 2 of them, in a very understaffed and stretched ward. She often worked additional shifts to cover for the staffing issues, and no one had any issue with her practice at the time. And then babies started to take ill and die. According to some, it was an unusually high number of deaths in a short period, 3 in 3 weeks, with the neonatal unit reporting a much lower rate of death in previous years. So an informal review was conducted by Erin Powell, who was a unit manager, and Stephen Brewery, who was the lead neonatologist at the hospital. And all of this was reported to the committee of the NHS Foundation Trust, who said the deaths were all considered to be either medication or timing issues. And I took that to mean not that they were being given the wrong medicine, but they were being treated too late to be able to save them. Now, Brewery was a bit sus of Lucy, and he wasn't happy with the hospital for ignoring his concerns. It seems his main reason for his suspicions was that Lucy was on shift at the time of all the babies' deaths. However, she was also on shift pretty much all the time because there was no staff, and it was definitely lower than the recommended national level at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She volunteered for additional shifts. She was fairly newly minted ICU infant nurse. She was young, she was energetic, and she seemed to be really into her work. The hospital staff and the consultants met in February 2016, where they went through the cases of 10 babies that had died between April 2015 and December 2015. In one of the cases, twin boys had both passed away, one within 24 hours of the other. In some of the cases, the babies had appeared to be responding to care and then suddenly collapsed and died. That's certainly how it's reported repeatedly in the press about these cases. In this review, each of the cases were looked at, and there were no obvious patterns to the deaths, in as much as they didn't all die from the same thing with the same symptoms. The Care Quality Commission visited the hospital in February 2016 and was told by staff that it was difficult to raise concerns with managers. And I'm going to surmise this was our mate, Dr. Brewery, complaining that no one had taken his concerns seriously from when he first raised them in June 2015. However, they weren't informed that there'd been a rise in infant deaths over the past 7 months. Their report indicated that there were issues with staffing levels and that there was a skill mix amongst the staff, i.e. not everyone had the same level of skills in the unit, but overall said there was a positive culture where people did feel supported to raise concerns and get professional development. And I believe in the same report, they gave glowing feedback about Lucy and her professional practice. So by May 2016, the executive team decided that the spike in infant mortality was a coincidence and nothing major was done, even though statistically the death rate was 10% higher than expected and was double that of 2014. Stephen Breary, having noted Lucy was on shift when the babies had died, called the duty executive on the 24th of June 2016, demanding Lucy be removed from the unit. 2 babies had died not long after she got back from a holiday in Ibiza, so he was, by this time, convinced she was doing something to them. The duty exec ignored his demands, and I don't think at that time that any of her managers or supervisors thought that there was actually anything wrong with her practice. They thought that he was just taking one fact, which was that she was there most regularly, as the reason for all these deaths, and there was no evidence to suggest that she was doing anything. The exec directors had a meeting at the end of June and considered involving the police, but they didn't pursue this action. Instead, they got a review done by the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. Lucy was removed from the unit and finished working there on the 30th of June 2016, going into an admin role. And this is important. At the same time as removing her, they increased the age limit for admissions from 27 weeks to 32 weeks and reduced the capacity of the unit. Swanee, is at 39 weeks the average gestation period?
Yep.
So 27 weeks is a significantly young birth.
Mm.
You know, when you see them, the tiny, teeny, tiny little creatures in, what are they called? The
Humidity
boxes.
cribs.
Humidity
cribs
The
and
boxes.
and you know, you see the giant parents' hands because the baby is so tiny. That we're talking tiny little babies.
So, Schmidty, when you say she was removed, did they say why?
Good question. I think they must have. I think she definitely knew she was under some form of investigation and she'd been moved into an administrative role. She hadn't been stood down as in you can't work.
Yeah, it
but
just
she'd
sounds
been
like she
removed
wasn't
from the
doing
unit.
anything wrong necessarily, but they've removed
They've
her.
responded to these concerns and said, look, we'll move you out. But the
Well, you
reason
were there.
yeah, you were there. You worked there. I mean, it must have been you. And that's the reason I also raised that they increased the age limit for admissions and they reduced the capacity of the unit. So they took less babies and they took older babies.
And their death rate improved straight away?
Remarkably, yes.
Wow.
So
Must have been her then.
having done, and that's the point, having done a review, because if they'd just done one thing, removed her, then you could say, oh, yeah, got it.
You could compare apples with apples.
Correct, yes. So having done a review of the unit, they couldn't find anything to pin the spike of infant mortality on, but they did cite the lack of staffing and senior cover to be a possible contributing factor. Apparently the RCPCH, which is the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, they praised Lucy's nursing skills and said that the suspicions about her came from a subjective view with no other evidence. Another specialist from Great Ormond Street was asked to do a detailed case review of the deaths, but she was too busy. So she did a cursory review of the notes of 17 deaths and other incidents. Not all babies in the period died. And she said that 13 of the deaths could have been prevented with different care, and the other 4 should be looked at from a local forensic review as to the circumstances. And by that, she was talking about things like staffing. Look more closely at the 4. There's not enough in the notes to tell me what probably led to their deaths. She's not saying they need to be exhumed and have a forensic pathology report. So when the exec met again, the report was discussed and positioned that Jane Horden, the Great Ormond Street expert, said the deaths were due to issues with leadership and timely intervention, and the chair later said he'd been misled about how deep a review it was in its findings. And by that, I'm surmising that he thought she'd done a much more detailed review, as she had been requested to initially, not a cursory 5-page report, which is what she actually gave them. Lucy herself, to your question, Clarkey, was not happy that she'd been transferred to administrative duties, as she felt she was being picked on by the consultants. And she put a grievance forward, which was upheld by the board in January 2017, as again they thought she'd been removed with no hard evidence as to any wrongdoing. The CEO met with Lucy and her parents, and they apologised for how she'd been treated, and the consultants were asked to write a letter of apology to her, which they did in February 2017. And I'm guessing that would have really pissed them off. So, unsurprisingly, in March 2017, Stephen Breary and Ravi Jayaram, 2 of the 4 lead consultants, called the police after they'd complained to a regional neonatal lead. They met with the Cheshire Police in April, and Ravi Jayaram told them that infant collapses are nearly always explainable. Except that according to a study of infant deaths in southeast London, which was published in a reputable mag, Journal of Maternal, Fetal and Neonatal Medicine, sounds good, doesn't it?
Don't think we have that in our newsagent.
Yeah.
Oh, not that I've checked.
Sells out.
Yeah, true.
It's 2 copies.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. The study that was published in that mag said that about half of all unexpected infant collapses remain unexplained after an autopsy. So, no, Ravi, that wasn't quite right. Of course, the police wouldn't know that. So you've got a neonatalist care specialist coming in saying, oh, no, they're always explainable and these are unexplainable. So you'd be like, okay, fair enough. So the police start to investigate, and the NHS Trust announced that they were on the case to help seek assurances that it enabled them to rule out unnatural causes of death. Enter stage left Dr. Dewey Evans. I think it's Dewey, actually. It's Welsh. Dr. Dewey Evans, a retired paediatrician turned professional expert witness who emailed the National Crime Agency and told them that if they hadn't had a paediatric or neonatal contact, then he was their guy. He even said, quote, "If the Chester Police had no one in mind, I'd be interested to help. Sounds like my kind of case." Apparently, the Chester Police were like, yeah, great, that sounds good.
That saves us having to find someone. Come on over.
I mean, we haven't got anyone yet. And hey, if you're free, we'd totes appreciate it. So he goes to the police and they give him the clinical records of 61 cases that needed review. Evans goes through all these cases and comes up with a series of reports on the cases and includes his view on what had happened and introduces a review of published literature about air embolus in newborn infants. Also, his findings were peer-reviewed by a woman whose name I can't remember, and I've got mixed reports as to whether or not I read somewhere that she didn't agree with his findings, but then I read an account from her to say that whether or not she agreed with his findings, her position was all of these children were stable, all the babies were stable prior to their collapses or deaths, which is up for question. Now, the police arrested Lucy on the 2nd of July 2018 on suspicion of 8 counts of murder and 6 counts of attempted murder. She was bailed but rearrested on June 2019, bailed again and then rearrested. And I don't really understand the point of all this bailing and rearresting. And then on the 10th of November 2020, so she said she got arrested again, but this time no bail. So she's been in and out of jail, arrested, bailed, arrested without bail. Lucy denied killing any of the babies, but did say there were issues with hygiene and staffing levels at the hospital, which contributed to the spike in infant deaths. And her trial began at Manchester Crown Court in October 2022, 4 years after her initial arrest. And I think we can all imagine what this trial was like. We've got the families of all the babies who've passed attending. We've got Lucy's parents there to support her and some of her colleagues, I think. And, of course, the media.
Did she have some colleagues who were on her side?
Yes.
Throughout? Oh, wow.
She's had colleagues on her side. They then later on, some of them turn a bit, but it's an interesting one.
Okay.
So the babies are referred to as baby A through to Q, which I will admit has caused me some issue trying to work out timelines and cross-reference information about each case. But basically, there were 22 counts against Lucy, 7 counts of murder and 15 counts of attempted murder. Not only were the identities of the babies and living victims, i.e. attempted murder victims, concealed, but also the identity of 9 colleagues who gave evidence. It's not usual to request anonymity unless you can prove your life would be endangered, but the judge approved the request as she figured it was more important to get their testimony than for them to be known by anyone. Now, the evidence in this case is frankly problematic. Baby E's mother testified she had heard her baby screaming and walked into the room to find the baby had blood around his mouth. She described the scream as something you'd not expect from a baby, like it was just this horrific sound. According to her, Lucy was in the room, though not near the baby at the time. I got the impression she was standing at a desk or something.
Box.
No, at a desk or something, probably writing something up. She was occupied doing something.
The
And
baby box.
when the mum asked about the blood, Lucy, no, it wasn't a humidity crib, thanks.
The baby box.
The baby box, yeah. When the mum asked about the blood around her mouth, Lucy explained it was probably from a nasogastric tube. Trying to reassure her, Lucy said, "Trust me, I'm a nurse." Sadly, the baby became increasingly ill and died a few hours later.
Credibility issue right there.
Lucy sent a sympathy card to the parents on the day of the baby's funeral. Weirdly, she had taken a photo of the card on her phone and she still had it there when she was arrested. Apparently, she'd been told to leave grieving parents alone more than once, and she also told a colleague that taking baby A to the mortuary was the hardest thing she'd ever had to do. She's 25. Just remember, she's 25, and that's probably the first infant to die in her care. I'm guessing it probably wasn't an easy thing to take that baby to the mortuary. The prosecution also made an awful lot about text messages she sent to friends and colleagues. And again, she's 25. She's only just started working in an intensive care neonatal unit. I don't think she's had years of experience dealing with infant death or grieving parents. 3 days after baby A died, Lucy offered to do more shifts in the intensive care unit. This is a message to her boss, saying she needed to get her confidence back. But when that didn't happen, she had a bit of an argument over it about it with another colleague. Not long after this, baby C got worse and died the following day. And baby C was the 3rd death in 3 weeks. One of her colleagues sent her a sympathetic text, which she replied she'd keep ploughing on, and I think there's an element of fate involved. There's a reason for everything. Now, I just want you to remember this thing about baby C. I'll talk about it again later.
Which thing?
She has a fight with a colleague,
Yeah.
and then baby C gets sick and dies the next day. It's
I don't see
implied.
the connection.
That's right. It's implied that there's a connection, and I don't think there is one.
What, she clubbed the colleague with baby C? I don't.
No, she didn't, but
It
I will
just-
tell you what happened to baby C as we progress.
Okay.
So the prosecution goes on about her text messages, calling them live blogging of events and as displaying intrusive curiosity. Apparently, she also searched for the families of several of the infant victims on Facebook, including on the anniversaries of their deaths and on Christmas Day. The prosecution called this hunting for grief. She had searched 11 of the families affected out of a possible 61 cases, and she searched for the families of the infants 31 times over, I think it's a year period. But to put this in context, she searched for other people 2,287 times in the same period of time.
As in, she served the same people that many times, or
Crikey doing?
2,087
No,
other
just
people?
well, she might have looked for some of them more than once, but you know, it's
Yeah,
like when
so she's Facebook stalked people.
correct, right? Like
Yeah.
many people with a phone and a bit of time to kill, she exercised what you might call morbid curiosity. She's also kind of been there when these children have died. I wouldn't say she had extensive relationships with the families, but she was there at these critical moments. And so she may well have thought, I just wonder how they're coping, or, you know,
She
Anyway.
may have even felt a little bit of guilt for no.
we will get onto it. Yes.
Right. Okay.
The
good chat.
prosecution lent very heavily into her being present for all the deaths, although it turns out she wasn't actually present when baby C died. And again, I'll talk about that in a sec. They made out that when her shifts were changed to day shifts, the deaths followed her. They basically used a chart. So they produced this chart showing when she was on shift as evidence as saying by a process of simple elimination, she must have been responsible for the incidents, which is, of course, the whole case that Stephen Breary was pushing. Now, the chart might have seemed compelling, but several statisticians and others have pointed out post-trial that the use of the chart and the criteria by which incidents were included or not were factors that could discredit this as evidence. So there were a couple of incidents where no one was harmed and the babies were fine. They weren't included in this special chart. And there were incidents where she wasn't there that were not on the chart. So the chart's questionable.
It was a chart of her,
The Lucy Letby chart.
of her, the bad things she'd done.
Yes. She was the only nurse on duty for 25 of the incidents. But as I've already said multiple times, they had low staffing levels. And is that really surprising? If there's only 2 junior nurses, one of them's probably going to be around. And there were 61 incidences. One of the consultants testified that in February 2016, he walked in on Lucy standing over a baby that was desaturating and she had failed to intervene.
What does that mean, Dio?
Desaturating.
It's where they're
Drying out?
Sounds like leakage.
No oxygen in the lungs.
Oh.
I can't remember how it happens. It's described later, but effectively,
Desaturating is no oxygen in the lungs.
the oxygen saturation levels have reduced.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that's what it comes from. So
Right.
she said it's all just
They weren't
happened.
waterboarding it or anything.
No, she.
What's that?
They weren't
Well,
waterboarding it or anything.
Yeah, that's right.
it's
Just
implied
sounds.
that she's waterboarding or doing these things, but she's just standing there. The baby's just starting to, probably monitors and shit are going off. He walks in and she says, "It's just happened now." And they both worked on the baby and they were able to resuscitate it and the baby survived. In March and June 2016.
Is that an example of her guilt or of her non-guilt?
Or of her having a panic where she didn't know what
Relevance,
to
Your
do.
Honour.
In March and June the trial's full of this, 2016, another 3 babies died under Lucy's care. The consultants were shocked as a set of triplets who had ostensibly been in good health took ill and 2 of them passed away. So this is another thing that happens throughout this case is they were fine when I left them is kind of implied all the time. And some of these babies were not fine at all when anyone left them. They were premature
They're
or they had
27 weeks.
They weren't all that
gestation.
young. Some of them were older. There was one child in there who was actually full term that passed away. I think she passed away. And I can't remember what the cause of death was, but anyway.
It's high risk, though.
I think so. And the whole way through it, and when you listen to other people report on it, no one sort of says this is an environment where, yes, statistically they had less deaths in previous years. But there is an inquiry that is done later, and they have a look into things like the age groups and did they have more there at the time? Were the staffing levels lower? And it's when you look at it like that way, in that way, I mean, there's definitely a spike in mortality. There's no questioning that. This is a hospital that didn't have this
So
many.
it must be her fault.
They're trying to find whose fault it is, and they've decided it's hers. Yes. So in August 2015, 2 twins took ill, one passing away and the other becoming ill within hours, but that one did recover, thankfully. Now, at this point, the police ascertained that baby F had unusual blood test results, as did another baby L. This became the cornerstone of the trial, saying that this was evidence that Lucy had injected them with insulin. Again, post-trial, it has been ascertained that the level of insulin required to be injected would have been considerably more than the prosecution made out, and there was no evidence of missing or signed out insulin from the hospital pharmacy to account for it. They've also questioned the testing methodology in the first place and said if you'd used a mass spectrometer, you actually would have got a more accurate result instead of the type of test that they did. It's all to do with insulin and I can't remember the other thing, but how quickly it disappears effectively. So once you've had a spike, your blood work will show either heightened or lower, and one of these babies, I think, they were measuring now it's a question as to why are you measuring this child's blood count and its insulin levels over an X period of time if that child does not have an underlying illness that has got something associated with its blood levels. But they did. They kept measuring it over time, and then it had what looks like some kind of, I'm not a doctor, but hypoglycemic attack, as did a second baby. But everyone's decided, or certainly Dewey Evans had decided that she's been injecting these children with insulin to kill them. Other staff came out and said that they had raised concerns about Lucy, but had been told not to say such things and to not make a fuss. And when we say other staff, I think our friends, the consultants. Another doctor recalled Lucy saying an hour before a baby died, "He's not leaving here alive, is he?" The doctor told her not to say that and left the ward, and the baby died not long afterwards. And maybe if she has sat there and watched a whole bunch of babies die, she's starting to see what it looks like when a baby's going to die. It's a bit like the palliative nurse telling my sister 2 weeks before Mum died, when no one would give us any indication as to how long they thought she had. She's probably got about 2 weeks at this stage. That pal nurse called it because they're in it. They witness it. They see it all the time, which was a hell of a shock for us because everyone had sort of been acting like Mum was going to live for several more months, but almost to the day, 2 weeks, yeah. So after they removed her from the ward, guess what? The unexpected deaths did stop. So it must be it, to your point, Clarkey, the smoking gun. Well, as they also reduced the number of intakes and increased the age limit on the babies, you could argue that they addressed multiple issues that were causing the spike. Too many ill babies, very premature and more vulnerable to infection, and by reducing the capacity, increased the level of care per patient so that they could be cared for properly. Or you could say they removed a murderer from the unit. If you're on Team Lucy did it, you could surmise that she used methods that would be very hard to prove. Overfeeding milk. I wasn't aware that you could kill a baby by overfeeding the milk. Apparently you can. Injecting air in their veins. Yes, that will kill an adult too. Or stomachs, which I found really weird, or injecting insulin into them. So this Dewey Evans also suggested that she was using their nasogastral tubing to pump air into their abdomen as well as milk, and that killed some of these babies. I think I've also read somewhere where people go, that won't kill a baby. I would imagine
Too
it
much
would be
cappuccino?
very uncomfortable, a bit like my
Baby cappuccino.
bicarb
Baby
scenario
chino.
earlier
Baby chino.
today.
Yeah.
The other definition.
Maybe you can kill a baby by overfeeding the milk. I hadn't heard of that, but the pumping stomach into the abdomen, and I'm not talking about injecting air into the baby's abdomen. We're talking about into their stomach with a gastric tube.
Making cappuccino.
It's weird. Anyway, that's what he thought was happening. To add to what is already a case of circumstantial evidence and hearsay, when they searched her home and handbag, they found a bunch of notes that she'd written that said things like, "Help, I'm sorry that you couldn't have a chance at life. I don't want to do this anymore. Not good enough. Why me? I haven't done anything wrong. We tried our best and it wasn't enough. I am evil. I did this. And I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." Another document that was presented said, "I don't know if I killed them. Maybe I did. Maybe this is all down to me." Now, when she was asked about when she wrote these notes, because it does sound a bit like the ravings of a murderer, she says that she wrote them when she was under investigation and they were an outpouring of her mental anguish. And as it turns out, the press decided that they were some kind of confession. However, her GP had actually advised her to write down her thoughts to help manage her anxiety while she was being investigated. So effectively, they were a form of therapy. And multiple psychologists and even criminologists have said that's not evidence that she wrote that down. These are, this is, and on balance, when you read them, they're quite wild, that she's written them all on Post-it notes and stuff. But on balance, the message is very much like, I'm feeling guilty. So to your point, Clarky, that I couldn't save these babies. Maybe it is my fault. Maybe I have done something wrong. Not, yes, I injected them with insulin. Yes,
Yeah.
I overfed them with
Not
milk.
writing out exactly what I did to kill them. It's just
I don't
that
even
guilt
know how I
feeling.
killed them, but I think I maybe did. Because what else is the explanation? And
'Cause
that is
that's what
what
they're all
everyone's
telling
telling me. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Another bit of information that some says weird was that she had marked her diary with the initials of the deceased infants on their birthdays, the days they'd become unwell, and when they had died. She also had sensitive medical documents under her bed, including handover sheets, resuscitation records, and blood gas readings. Not one or two, mind you, 257 sheets,
That's weird.
of which 21 related to the babies that she was accused of hurting. So the vast majority of these bits of paper bore no relation to any of these incidents.
No, but that's weird.
She says she has a habit of sticking papers in her pockets and forgetting to take them out at the hospital.
So she
Now-
puts them under her bed.
Yeah, like
Well, she probably knows she's not meant to get rid of them, doesn't know what to do with them. And look,
no.
I'm not sure what this is supposed to indicate, because I'd get it if she'd made a scrapbook of each of the victims' notes, but it sounds to me like she's got ADHD or something.
Oh, like 100%. It doesn't sound like anything to do with her
Murdering
guilt.
children.
It just sounds weird. Like, why
She's
on
got
earth are you
some
doing
weird
that,
compulsion.
crazy lady?
One of those little compulsive behaviours, I'd say, yeah. And I would say if she does have ADHD or something like that, it aligns to some other comments that some of her lovely colleagues have made about her, like her being, either over the top with the parents or too emotional, or in other cases she's too remote or whatever. So, in this day and age where everyone's on the spectrum, no one talks about this, by the way. No one says, well, some of her what might be personality peculiarities are probably down to X, Y, and Z. For the vast majority of time, there has been no Team Lucy. It is all Team Lucy did it. So also, on top of the prosecution that has built a case on people seeing her standing in a room or being too sympathetic when a baby dies or taking paper home or not being the consultant's cup of tea.
Being too sympathetic when a baby dies.
Apparently she was, yeah. And it was like, well, the other nurses, they were a bit more remote, so I don't understand. I thought she was caring and sympathetic, and maybe she was. Again, I'll put it down to, she doesn't have the years of experience of some of the other nurses who are completely desensitized, having seen it all before, and probably didn't, probably responded like a young person. Anyway, I am surmising. So my point is, the prosecution's whole case is about her standing in a room, being too sympathetic. She's a conscientious nurse who's probably not experienced enough to deal with the trauma of so many unexpected deaths. On top of all of that, her defence team was shithouse. They only called Lucy herself as a witness, and I think she was on the stand for something like 18 days or something like that, and a plumber. Lucy didn't do very well on the stand. She was tearful. She contradicted herself. She was just all over the shop, basically. She got frustrated with the prosecution's questioning, probably because they're accusing her of killing
18
people.
days on the stand.
Yep. She said that she felt she was made to feel incompetent, but she meant no harm. So I get the feeling she doesn't even know why she's there. She went on to say, I don't think you can be accused of anything worse than that. I just changed as a person. My mental health deteriorated. I felt isolated from my friends on the unit. Now, I have heard a couple of journos who were present at the trial, and they are definitely she done it. And they were saying that it's interesting that they said that there was some evidence that the jury heard that hasn't been released in the press, etc. And maybe that's the smoking gun that I'm not seeing because it's not been released. But they really lent into her behaviours. So it was more about whether or not she seemed remorseful. Did she cry about when the babies were, when they talked about these babies' deaths? She didn't cry. She cried about one baby, but she didn't cry about all the babies. But she cried about how fucked her life was, how she'd been accused of something. She cried about how she'd lost her job. She cried, well, wouldn't you? I don't think that's evidence of a crime. That's how she's responding in the stand in this situation. I said the other witness that they called was a plumber.
Yep.
So he was called because at the time of the deaths, and for a long period, he said he was pretty much at the hospital once a week because there was a problem with the sewage that kept bubbling up the sinks. And the hospital had cases of pneumonia that was caused by this and were quietly battling a superbug, which no one talked about in the trial. Do you remember when MRSA became a thing?
Mm-hmm.
This to me reminds me, can't speak about this hospital at all, never been there, but it reminds me of one in Bristol called Frenchay Hospital, I think it was. It might even be closed by now. But that was the most horrific thing I've ever seen. And it was this old build and it hadn't been revamped. And when you look at the outside of the Countess Chester Hospital, it looks like an older NHS building. This plumber's out there trying to get the sewage to stop bubbling up out of the sinks every week. But what kind of a defence team just calls a plumber in?
I know, right?
They failed to call any medical experts to the stand. Instead, they were effectively relying on the prosecution having to provide the burden of proof, confident that they couldn't really because there was none. That's right. There is no evidence that any of the babies were killed by someone. Autopsies were carried out on the majority of them, and the coroner could not find anything to suggest foul play.
Did they find causes of death for all of them? It's not like they're going, we don't know what happened.
No, not all. So, I mean, in some cases, the babies died from cardiac arrest. That's the cause of death. They're not really quite sure what caused it. Back to old mate Ravi, who reckons that there's no such thing as an unexplained collapse. 50% of babies who die they can't work out why in autopsy. I was watching some program on the case. Now, I apologise. It was on YouTube. I only watched a bit of it, so I can't remember what it was in terms of giving it a citation. But the bit that stuck out for me was this consultant, Ravi Jayaram. He had this epiphany about a possible cause of death of one of the babies. He'd seen this discoloration on the abdomen of one of the babies and he couldn't explain it. And apparently the doctors and nursing staff saw this across multiple babies in the case. And then he was reading, or he saw some old report by Dr. Shu Lee, who's an expert from Toronto, that he'd written in 1989 that the skin discoloration was linked to air embolism in the venous system. And he was like, that's it, voila. But Dr. Lee has since said that he was wrong. And in no cases was skin discoloration linked to air embolism by the venous system. Instead, these cases were connected to the arterial system, which would mean that if she had been injecting these babies, she would have had to have been injecting air into an artery, not just subcutaneously. But due to the dodgy evidence the prosecution put forward and a failure to interrogate this by the defence, Justice James Goss ruled that there was a sufficient body of accepted expert medical opinion that administration of air into the venous system could cause air embolism, which might be fatal, which there isn't. Another line of the prosecution was around an alleged relationship Lucy had with one of the doctors or consultants that had gone
here we
bad.
go. This makes
Yeah,
sense.
it got my attention.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry,
Guilty.
I don't go on about it because there's no evidence of it. There's a note somewhere that she wrote, said to someone, I thought we were really good friends. Can't you help me or something? And that's just another bit of shit thrown in there to malign Lucy and make it look like she was being batshit crazy over being a jilted lover, I think is where they were headed with that. So based on all that nonsense, the jury found Lucy Letby guilty of 7 counts of murder on the 18th of August 2023. They couldn't agree on a further 6 counts of murder, but she was acquitted of the attempted murder counts for baby G and baby H, and they couldn't reach a verdict on 5 others. Lucy was sentenced to life imprisonment and a whole life order. She's now the 4th woman in UK history, remember our mate Joanna Dennehy, to have this sentence. The judge said there was a deep malevolence bordering on sadism. You have no remorse. There are no mitigating factors, and the offences are of sufficient severity to require a whole life order, which, in fairness, is probably true. Had she killed, and she may have killed 6 kids. She was then retried on the 10th of June 2024 for one of the 6 counts of attempted murder, and they found her guilty again. And she got another whole life order, which to me seems a bit unnecessary. You can't do whole life twice.
Is she part cat?
She's appealed several times, and including on the retrial, because she was like, it's going to be entirely prejudiced by the press coverage, and it, I'm sure was.
Yeah.
What? First case ever.
Anyway, she's appealed several times and she's been rejected, and as I understand it, this is based on the fact that the evidence that has been brought forward was available at the time of the original trial, but her shitty defence team did nothing with it, and so tough shit, you're doing life because your defence team was rubbish.
Oh, God.
Why was the defence team so weak? Who were they? Was it just 2?
Well, you're right, Swanee. I don't know who they are because I'm so annoyed by them, but perhaps I shall get their names and put it on our website so that if you're in the UK and you're being faced with a criminal charge, do not use those people. An inquiry into the circumstances of the deaths and other incidents was called, and Lady Justice Thirlwall was appointed to chair it. It's now called the Thirlwall Inquiry. Not much new came from it, however. It was revealed that the same cases and documentation that Dr. Dewey Evans looked at were reviewed by a load of currently practicing experts who found no evidence of foul play. A new defence team is on the case, which has called into question some of the behaviour of the prosecution's lead expert witness, Dr. Dewey Evans. I keep calling him Dewey, it's Dewey. But anyway, he apparently changed. Dewey sounds better. He apparently changed his mind
Your
about
Welsh accent sounds
Dewey.
Ridiculous, but probably apt. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure it's accurate.
I did the pronunciation guide on it. It's Dewey.
Oh, Dewey.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're mumbling.
It does.
No, I know. That's why I keep wanting to call him Dewey. But he
Louis,
seems like
Dewey
a
and Louie.
Dewey to me. Yeah. He apparently changed his mind about how some of the babies may have died because he wasn't there and he doesn't know. And it sounds to me like getting the evidence to fit the crime. On the 4th of February 2025, Lucy Letby's legal team applied for her case to be reviewed as a potential miscarriage of justice. Coinciding with this application, findings from a panel of 14 international medical experts were released. The panel was chaired by Dr. Shu Lee, the same guy whose 1989 report was used to pin her. The panel concluded that there was no medical evidence to support claims that Lucy Letby deliberately harmed or murdered babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Instead, they attributed many of the babies' death to natural causes or substandard medical care, highlighting issues such as inadequate staffing and delays in essential treatments. These findings challenged Lucy's convictions, concluding that the deaths were due to factors unrelated to any deliberate actions on her part. A witch hunt is underway, with some of the senior staff at Countess of Chester Hospital being stood down as they're accused of ignoring warnings about Lucy. But then again, they could be on the right side of history. We'll just wait and see. In August 2024, a report was leaked to the Telegraph that showed that the unit on which Lucy worked had suffered an outbreak of a dangerous bacteria during the period in which the infant Letby was convicted of murdering died. This outbreak was not mentioned in the trial. Commenting on the leaked report, Professor of Medical Microbiology David Livermore argued that the bacterial outbreak is a simpler explanation for the observed spike in deaths on the unit than that Lucy had murdered several infants. In an article on unheard. And by the way, I think one of these doctors actually made comments at the time and was expecting to be called up, and for whatever reason didn't get called as a witness by that shitty defense team. And I read that Lucy herself had said, no, don't bother, but God knows what advice she had. In an article on her unheard.com, which reports on statements made by Tory MP David Davis, further analysis from yet more medical experts indicate that two of the babies, baby O and baby C, died as a result of the actions of the attending consultants. Can we guess who that is? At the trial, the prosecution said that all the babies were perfectly fine till Lucy came along. According to David Davis, this isn't quite the case. Baby O had significant trauma to his liver. This was described as the result of a violent attack by Lucy Letby. Quoting the article by David Rose, in the case of baby O, who died in June 2016, Davis said they suggested that the doctors used excessive pressure during resuscitation, which overinflated the baby's lungs and prevented blood from flowing back into the lungs. This caused the baby to desaturate, which suffer a dangerous fall in oxygen levels. But confronted by this, the medical team responded by increasing the pressures even more, initiating a downward spiral in the baby's condition. The overinflation of the baby's lungs forced the diaphragm downward, pushing the liver into the baby's abdominal cavity. It was then, Davis said, that the consultant in charge took a decision to insert a needle into the abdomen to release what they thought was pressure in the abdomen. However, this was wrongly inserted into the right side of the baby's abdomen. As a result of this error, the needle penetrated the liver. The notes, said Davis, suggest that the death of baby O was avoidable and resulted from suboptimal care. Baby C's case notes also contained evidence of suboptimal care. Davis told the House he died in June 2015, having been profoundly unwell before birth. Born weighing just 1.7 pounds, he had difficulty breathing and was treated with surfactant, a substance administered via an endotracheal
790.
tube. It was
Not
tiny,
even a kilo.
tiny.
Yeah.
But according to the case notes, David said the doctor in charge pushed the tube in too far, pushing it into the lung, meaning the other lung was left collapsed. Moreover, in the days after the baby's birth, he showed several signs of abdominal obstruction, including the vomiting of bile, and never opened his bowels. Yet the doctor did not recognise these symptoms. The report by Aiton and Dimitrova concludes this baby died of natural causes compounded by suboptimal medical care. Letby's conviction for murdering baby C rests on an X-ray, which the prosecution claimed revealed he had excess air in his abdomen, administered by her. Yet, according to Davis, it has become clear that Letby was not even at the hospital when the X-ray was taken, nor has she been since baby C's birth 2 days earlier. Baby C's the one who apparently fell ill and died the day after she had an argument with someone about wanting to work on the ICU.
Yeah.
As far as we can understand, baby C had
No
took
interaction
ill.
with her.
Well, baby C was born at 700 grams, probably had an obstructed bowel that no one had done anything about, probably got sepsis as a result of it, also had a breathing issue, which they inadvertently collapsed one of his lungs, and then they blamed her.
But didn't you
because she
say
had
she
an argument
wasn't
with
on
someone.
the?
She
Didn't
wasn't
say
there
she
from the
w-
birth of the baby. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure how old the baby was when it died, though, right? So she
Sorry.
effectively what it's saying is she wasn't even around. But I think good point actually, is that they're saying that she had put air in his body, right? The reality was she wasn't there to put air in his body, and the X-ray was taken. Yeah, so the air was
that's what I
already there.
understood it
Yeah.
as. God.
So in closing this story, I want to call out a few things. Lucy Letby may well have murdered and attempted to murder these infants. There's no evidence to directly link her to any of their deaths other than she worked there and she was present for some, not all, of their deaths. There was an infection that the hospital was trying to address which wasn't discussed at trial. The evidence put forward was flawed and circumstantial. The families who lost their babies have had to relive the trauma of their loss all over again and have had the circumstances of their deaths discussed over and over again. I can't even imagine the damage that this has caused them. To even question whether Lucy Letby is a serial killer is extremely offensive to these families, and I can't begin to imagine what they've gone through. But Lucy Letby had no motive to kill babies. She had no prior psychological issues. She had a perfectly normal upbringing. From the very first time I read about this story, it hasn't sat right with me. Each time I hear she's appealed, I think, right, it's going to come out now. This time we'll find out more about it. They'll prove that she's done it or that she hasn't. I don't think she deliberately killed any of the babies. She, like other staff and the system at the hospital, may well have contributed to their deaths. The internal reviews were pointing to systemic issues with the handling of care. The external reviews said the same thing. Too few staff, too few qualified senior staff, consultants who didn't refer one baby for surgery in time, and it died. Errors in treatment, sticking a needle in a liver. Infections present at the hospital, which would attack vulnerable premature babies and sick babies. And the police used an expert witness who, if you look at a wiki on him, has fucked a series of other cases because he's got the hots for Munchausen's by proxy, which is pretty much what he accused Lucy of. It wouldn't have taken very much to do some due diligence. So, for my part, I want to sentence Dewey Evans to go back to medical school and to retrain. And at any time he thinks someone has bloody Munchausen's by proxy, the case has to be referred to another doctor because he can't be trusted on that. And also, it's a psychological disorder, so he shouldn't even be diagnosing it. He doesn't call it that, by the way. He calls it something else, but he's basically calling it Munchausen's by proxy. That was his reason for her motive. He decided she had that. The defence need to retrain as some other profession because this one's not for them. The whole legal system that says tough shit, you've got 2 whole life orders because your defence team sucked, that needs a seriously good look at. The consultants maybe take a little bit more accountability for cases where you inadvertently killed a child. At least 2 in my notes, let alone how many more. And the government for not funding the NHS properly. So many reviews found the same issues, lack of staffing. As I talked about that hospital, it looks like one of these older hospitals that hasn't had any funding or revamping. They haven't done anything to address it. I think this one will be one of those cases where, unfortunately for Lucy Letby, time will tell, or she may end up doing life in prison. But the Innocence Project has been looking into her case, and I'm not the only person who thinks this is off. Thoughts? I mean, I totally presented it in a biased fashion, but I presented it how I've read it.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think when you lose a child, you want someone to blame. So I think in some ways I can totally understand why people who have gone through that trauma don't want it questioned as to whether or not she really did it, because then you're back to, well, why did my baby die? But I'm not convinced. No one saw her do it. There's other evidence. There's things like swipe card information, but it turns out that was all fucked up too. So it's unreliable. You can't use it to determine that she was where she was or whatever. So it's all pinned on basically whether or not that testing of the insulin. Some people say, no, that's a bad test. Other people say, no, it's fine. Babies look like they had insulin in them. The babies with air in their bodies, the coroner and multiple other people who reviewed it have said there's nothing to suggest that was injected into them. It's just awful. Because if Lucy Letby didn't kill those kids, her life's ruined.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can't come back from that ever. She's already been struck off, by the way, by the Nursing Association. They're not going to take her back. Her life's
Why
ruined.
would she want to? No one would want to be associated with that.
But if she killed them, good. She's in hospital. She's in prison.
can I read you something else?
Yeah.
because I've Googled a Sun article,
Mhm.
so I think we're all on high alert already. But this is on the back of who was her lawyers. So it says, baby killer Lucy Letby's total legal aid bill has climbed to £1.7 million and will rise higher. So she was legal aid. The evil nurse was allowed to spend over £900,000 on barristers and over £800,000 on solicitors. The legal aid
Legal aid
agency
is
revealed.
legal aid's allowed to spend it, not her. She
Right,
didn't spend
right.
it.
But also, the
Oh.
same article says Letby's original 10-month trial cost the Crown Prosecution Service £2.5 million.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming the Crown are prosecuting her,
CPS,
and
yes. Yeah.
and legal aid are defending her.
As is her right as a citizen, yes.
Right, but so that's all government.
So
So
the
government have
prosecution spent
spent
2.5 and they've spent 1 point something.
all of which is the government, right?
Yeah.
It's not like somebody else is paying lawyers to prosecute her. The government are who are
Then there was that inquiry.
underfunding the hospital, and
Correct.
allegedly they're the ones who are responsible for it. And now they've spent £4 million prosecuting and defending her.
Yeah, but is that cheaper than having to pay compensation to 61 families?
I mean, and
Yes,
the
absolutely.
humiliation of the whole thing. So, but
Mhm.
they're saying Lucy's evil because of
Oh, it's the sun. The
all
sun's
of this. I mean,
disgusting.
I know it's
Even the
massive conspiracy theory, but far out.
no, even the BBC were like, we've covered this case forever, and they basically saying she defo did it. I'm sorry, no, I'm not sure she did. She may have contributed, as everyone else on that ward did, to the deaths of those kids by, I don't know, not washing your hands enough or whatever it is. But I don't think she maliciously murdered, did the things that she's accused of doing, and there's no evidence that she did.
It's in my industry of work, in the safety context, if there's something that is done, if someone gets injured or severely injured or dies at work, they do a big investigation into it to find out whether there's a cultural problem in the organisation, and therefore are the people who are managing responsible.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you could do exactly that in this situation. Find the NHS are responsible, blame the government, but we've got to spend $4 million on a legal case to make
To
some
prosecute
poor
this
girl
woman.
who is a victim of the bad culture responsible for it.
Unless she is a murderer. But I can't find
But
the
where's the
evidence that says
evidence?
she
That's
is. That's
the
right.
thing. Where's the
I
evidence?
mean, I'm trying to say, well, maybe she was so good at hiding it, but I don't think so. And then, they've gone back and they've tried to find out whether or not there was any incidents while she was at the Liverpool Women's Hospital. And they've investigated, but nothing's come out from that. So it appears like, and then I heard some other nonsense that she might have got the idea about the air embolism thing because she went and did a 3 weeks before the first baby died. She did a course on administering intravenous drugs or something, and they said, don't make sure you don't put oxygen. Now, I'm sorry, she's a registered nurse. She would already have known that. I know that. You don't inject people with air because it can give them a heart attack.
But that's you would learn straight as part of that's why
You'd
they always
learn that
squeeze
in
a
your
little
normal
bit.
nursing,
That's
right? In normal
standard.
nursing,
Yeah,
not
of
in a
course.
top-up freaking course that she did for a week, 3 weeks beforehand when she's already qualified to work in intensive care unit for infants. It's a stretch. There's so many times in this where they try to connect one thing and say, well, they're like, oh, I had a fight about wanting to go back on the ward. Wow, and then a baby died. Oh, well, you must. What the fuck?
Somehow you magically
And
did that.
the shit about the text messages, I didn't actually include them because they were such nonsense. It's like someone sends you a text, right? And she says at one point, another baby's died, right? And she says something like, I've had a really shitty day at work, but then I won £135 on the Grand National. So, hey. Now, I don't know if you've got friends who work in nursing or policing or any high
any
stress,
workplace.
high traumatic workplace. No, there are certain things that
but
are,
what I'm saying is even a not high trauma one, you would do that. Like,
exactly right. There's
far
nothing
out.
weird about her text messages at all. There's nothing weird about it. 25-year-old going, I had a fuck day at work, but I suppose I won some money on the lottery.
Also, as all of that plays out, regardless of the legal case, it would be affecting her mental health
100%.
dramatically.
100%.
She's probably trying her hardest, doing long shifts and all that kind of thing, and wondering what the hell's going wrong. I don't know.
I don't know if she did or she didn't do it, but I think that she's certainly a scapegoat for a system that is incredibly flawed. And it feels like the more senior people didn't have to take any responsibility in how they contributed with their level of care. It just feels like, oh no, it's just left to the junior nurse.
The third baby who died was the one that had the liver.
Yeah, the needle. Yeah.
You've got to question those consultants, don't you?
That's where I sort of think, it just feels like, let's just focus here. It's like all of the other contributing
There's nothing
factors.
to see here. Yeah. Go and look at her.
Yeah, and they were very good at making sure that the spotlight was not on them. So yeah, correct. I have no idea. I honestly don't know if she did or she didn't do it. But that is a shit show. The whole setup was so flawed, and then the idea that you've got someone who's really so young and so newly qualified doing some of the stuff that she was doing without support, or then the people that were there to her senior nursing staff, whatever else, not support her. Everyone's like, did they not have to take any responsibility? Where are their names? Sort of thing.
I think the senior nursing woman did support her. Good. And she's the one who's been stood down.
Oh, there you go.
So I said about the witch hunt.
Yeah.
There are several
definitely.
of the, and I mentioned that you asked about her colleagues.
Yeah.
Most of her colleagues were very supportive of her and said she would never do anything like that. And it was only after the trial, when they did that inquiry, that they were like, oh, well, actually, in hindsight, maybe. But they're completely biased now by the bullshit they did in that trial.
But that's totally what you'd expect to have happened.
And she's been called guilty. I'm not going to stand here and say, no, she wasn't.
You know what? I
It'll
thought
affect
maybe
my
I was wrong.
career.
Yes, absolutely. It's
disgusting. The whole thing's terrible. I would have found it difficult to have said, beyond reasonable doubt, I believe she's murdered these kids. So unless there is something very secret in that whole trial that hasn't come out, but I didn't see it.
I think her defense sounds so incredibly weak. That looks like she is responsible in the sense that they couldn't pull together there was just not enough there. There's nothing there.
Prosecution's job is to provide the burden of proof, not the defence's. But most defence teams would have tried a bit harder.
Yeah, there just doesn't seem to be anything there. I mean, very weak.
That's why it only cost 1 point. What was it?
Yeah,
1.6 million or something?
1.7 and 2.5. So half as much again to prosecute her as they're spending on defending her. It's interesting too, because I agree. You don't know whether she did it or not. You just don't see any evidence that she did. Like, there's no connection between it. And we've discussed other cases where not necessarily similar, but there's hospital cases where nurses or doctors are doing the wrong thing, and there's generally there's a connection. It's not like it's all just completely random, and it sounds like in this case that there's nothing that connects them all, and therefore what is her MO?
No, in terms of what killed them, no, she doesn't have if she's killing them, she's picking different ways to do it. Or then again, the hospital's an unsanitary place and the staff are a bit shit.
Like 100%.
That's actually what killed them.
And imagine if that was the response, then the legal case would be against the NHS. And
correct. And it would cost a lot more than a combined 2.5 or 1.7 million pounds. Yes.
Absolutely. I've purposely avoided that case. It's something that it's been, like floating around me or us, or been such huge coverage, and it's just something that I've always sort of gone, and I don't want to deal with babies being babies. Yeah, it's just all a bit much.
Maybe the non-mother. It was best that the non-mother covered it, and that was the other thing I will call out is that interesting that the person who did the inquiry was a female. It was Lady Thirlwell.
Yeah.
Gaga.
And I think she makes some comment about being a mother myself, yada, yada.
Yep.
And the couple of the journos that I heard who were very much Lucy Letby did it were as a mother, and we had a responsibility to the parents, the children. And I felt that you were immediately biased at that point because you're putting yourself in this, how would I feel? And therefore I need to, and I didn't approach it like that because I'm not a mother. Not that I don't love my nieces and nephews or whatever, but I remain detached in this. Also, it helps to be detached when the description of everything I read was medical jargon. So I actually read the notes from that February 2016 meeting that they had where they went through 10 of the cases, and that baby that died that hadn't opened his bowels, they actually say probably died of septic infection. There are some that are like not sure, autopsy, yes, no, but that baby, I thought that baby was very, very unwell.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about when they sort of go, no, they were all stable, they were all fine. It's like, I don't know that they were. And they might have been okay, but then they were put into a weird environment. And there was one baby, I can't remember what the circumstances were, but again, that the consultant neonatalist didn't then contact the surgery team and have a discussion about it. And that baby died, I think, because it needed surgery and they didn't do anything about it. And that when they suboptimal care. I mean, have you ever heard an understatement?
Yeah.
Suboptimal care.
To quote Jerry Cotton, it sounds like there was an unprecedented level of transparency at that hospital too.
Yes, opaque as. And they're all congratulating themselves on how good they were. But yeah, no. All right, well, it's a bit of a sad one, but time will tell whether
Very
or
technical
not
one, very
more
hard.
comes out. Not as hard as Bitcoin. I still don't understand
different.
that.
Yeah.
Tonight's been a night of blowing our minds on these things, but yes, well, when I said desaturation, the two of you were like, what?
I thought it was going to the toilet, like doing a wee, desaturating.
No, it's oxygen levels. But yeah, and look, I do feel sympathy for the families. Of course you do. You know, like people lost their babies. And
I feel sympathy for them in that, but I feel more that when these things go on and on, it'd be every time they turn the TV on or see a newspaper, just, you know how you just live your life, you'd be surrounded by it, you'd be unable to escape
imagine if we
it.
find out that she didn't do it and she gets released. How bad it would be for them then, because they went through all of that for nothing.
Yeah, and they will have convinced themselves that she's done it.
100% they have.
But the bug going round and all that stuff that comes out later, you know, like, it's so disrespectful to the victims and to the guilty party to not be very transparent about that
to not have just brought that all up in the first trial.
Yeah,
and that's where the defence failed, because the defence should have pulled all that out.
Yeah, they should have. But, I mean, the hospital with integrity should have been saying that too, you know.
Yes. The last thing I want to just say before I sign off is that group of people, all of those experts who got together and panel reviewed all of the cases and have said, no, we really don't believe there's any evidence of foul play in, I think, February 2025, so very recently. None of that was funded by Lucy Letby. They've just done it and they didn't get paid for it. They've just decided that they
Something
have
very
got
dodgy
to
is going on.
take a stand on this because there's a person doing a whole life order and they are unconvinced. Yeah, well, can't live your life twice, but they are unconvinced that she's actually done anything wrong. So bear that in mind too, that's how important it was. All right. Well, thanks for that. And on that note, as we say every week, miss you already.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ta-ta.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.